So if you're going to retopologize the face in Maya, which I think is probably going to be maybe the best, most controlled method, Z-Remesh is great, but then I often take it to Maya or use a combination of Z-Modeler and Maya to clean up the topology a bit, get it exactly where I want it to go. Topology brush, it has some weird snapping issues I find still. It's a little bit sloppy, but we can send this head to Maya. Now, if your head mesh is 1 million, 2 million, 5 million polys or more, I find you want to optimize this. So I'll show you quickly one of two ways. You can simply just dynamesh the head resolution lower. So again, if you're working on a really kind of slow machine, I wouldn't go this low maybe, but I find anywhere under like 400,000 polys for a slower machine is good. So I got this down to 165, which is okay. I'll show you one other tool that I use. So you can go to Z plugin, Decimation Master, and this is basically a two-step process. You want to pre-process the current tool. Then you pick what percentage of the mesh resolution you want, 100,000, 200,000, or you can pick the slider. It'll update based on the poly count that you have. So you pre-process first, then you hit decimate current. So pre-process the current subtool, decimate the tool. I use this tool a lot for 3D printing. So I'm going to just do a quick pre-process. It's going to turn the whole mesh into triangles, which again, it's not animation friendly, but sometimes they use decimation for like environmental objects like rocks and terrain, because that stuff isn't necessarily going to move, and basically it'll look even more rocky if it has kind of more chaotic triangles everywhere. So I've just done a process current. I'm going to go decimate current. So I'll say I want this thing to be maybe like 5%, 8%, let's say, and I'll say decimate. And you see it just strips out. Go to solo for a second, right? So if you look before and after, this is at 750,000 polys, and this is at 60,000 polys. It looks barely different. So it really does its best. It's a very smart algorithm that concentrates triangles where there's detail. So like along those lip lines and the crease there, it's very dense. And then in areas that are flatter and smoother, the triangles are elongated and stretched out. So I find decimating sometimes is a really good technique, especially to free up memory on a slower system. And this is, for me, it's going to be a disposable mesh anyways, because I just want to get to the remesh. So I'm going to go Z this thing over to Maya. One thing to mention is that this character mesh is actually very small. ZBrush's scale compared to Maya's is very, very small. So this thing, if you go under geometry, under size, you will see its kind of default size. So this is about 4 centimeters. ZBrush works in centimeters, as does Maya. So let's say if I want this thing to be like a kid to preteen size, I would say it's going to be like the head and shoulders will be about 20 to 25 inches. So this thing needs to be roughly 5 times bigger, I'll say, 5.5 times. So if you want things to export to the scale you want to work in for rigging and things like that, under export, you do have to do a little bit of math, but you take your calculation size from geometry and say, okay, I'm going to go 5.5 times bigger. So then when you go Z or export, it should bring that mesh in at a bigger scale for you. That is going to be easier to work in as well inside of Maya. So to start doing quad draw, you have to select the mesh. And in the Maya interface, you have to find there's a magnet icon. This makes this thing a live surface. So that's right here, this little magnet icon. Once that's activated, you want to make sure you're in the modeling toolkit. So that's just the little cube up here with the hammer icon. And then I usually like to activate my X symmetry. And one of the final steps to get this going is to say quad draw. Okay, so once you're in quad draw, you left click once to create dots. Okay, hold shift, left click, and you can fill in and create topology. So again, I'll maybe click top and bottom to start setting up my, lip topology. And I always like to have a little sort of square corner as well. So I'm going to just set that up right now. So hold shift. And then if I keep drawing dots outwards from here, there we go. We've got the topology starting to form in. So I'm just holding shift and clicking as I go. Okay, if you middle mouse click and drag, that's going to move that around. If you hold, I believe it's tab, left click and drag, it's going to do an extrusion. And then things will sort of snap along the center line. If you just hold shift, shift is like a relax, so it's going to average the distances out. I find this is really, really great because, again, I've mentioned before, you do want to watch out for density. You don't necessarily want vertices to be too close or too far apart, unless you intentionally really want that. So if you do want a creasing or a fold somewhere, then you need to put edges closer together. And if you want a smoother area, you want them further apart. But for me, a lot of times in the face, even topology is useful, with the exceptions being maybe around the hard edge of the lips or the hard edge of the eyelids or the crease around the nostril. So as I mentioned, if you hold tab and left click, you extrude one loop, okay? And if you hold tab and middle mouse click and drag, you extrude out a whole loop at once. So now I would just adjust my spacing here. So it's really, really kind of quick. It snaps very well, I find. It's a pretty clean tool to use compared to the topology brush of ZBrush. I'm not going to go over the techniques, for simplifying the mesh back in the head and things like that. But just to sort of show you, a lot of times too, I don't necessarily do a full extrusion around the mouth. I think it's a good idea to just extrude out a couple of edges from here, and then you can do tab, middle mouse, click and drag. And you can see it can be a little bit jumpy there, so just going to then snap that up. And then tab, middle mouse, click to extrude that whole loop there. So really, really good tool. Very, very clean results as well. And then I might just shift and drag to relax a bit. By the way, very, very easy thing to do. Go into the bottom of the modeling toolkit with Quad Draw on, and it gives you every single shortcut. So if you want to delete dots, it's Control Shift. Control Shift left click will delete either dots or edges. I believe Control click will add loops back in. So you want to add loops back in, you can do that. So just to let you know, there are some options there. There's quite a few options. So yeah, I usually have one of these outer loops, sort of the outer middle part of the upper lip. I usually have this loop connect up to the face. I usually don't like to get into too detailed of a mesh at this stage, so I'd probably actually take out one or both of these loops and then just quickly pop in a middle one, so it's a little bit simpler, right? And then I'll tab, middle mouse, click and drag here. So again, I'm keeping it very simple. This is going to be ultra low res, but I'll divide it once or twice and then project back in ZBrush. I won't cover that process again because we've already seen it. But just to let you know, it's very similar to what I did with the ZRemesh edition. So again, tab, middle mouse, click and drag. And you can follow, topology examples. There's all sorts of different great ones out there. So again, I usually have 2 dots for my corners. That's just a personal preference I've picked up over the years. So you can kind of use the dot method if that makes more sense for you. You can use the click and drag method. They're both valid and both work fine and are interchangeable inside of Quad Draw. So just drag this out here. So again, I always like to make sure my spacing is good, and again, I like even numbers of loops top and bottom, so I just want to double check that quickly. I think I might need just one more up here. Okay, so I'm going to drag this thing back here, and then I'll just hold tab and drag. Oops, sorry, tab middle click and drag. So things generally start to kind of flow upwards in this area, and then I'll smooth this out so it's a little more leveled out there. So I'll usually go up into and around the ears. For the head, I'll actually just take a sphere, turn it on its side, and match the poly count. So I'll show you guys that in a second. So again, I like things to kind of fan out in a natural looking way. So we start to kind of flow with the jawline as well back here. So again, tab middle mouse clicking and dragging. Again, I think it's one of the great features that the ZBrush Topology tool just is lacking, is it doesn't have these kind of quick extrusion options, which is really, really helpful for this quad draw tool. So again, I'll just hold shift to kind of average out some of the spacing here, so it's fairly even flow. So I'll extract this. This will start to track the topology a little closer. So I usually leave a very simplified cavity opening for that region. Yeah, it's at this point too you'll start to kind of see the topology get, you can simplify, once you get outside of the main face region you can simplify the mesh more. Okay, tab extrude that up. Okay, so once you're done, you just simply unclick the magnet icon, and it's going to give you now a separate floating mesh. So I'll just hit H to hide that. So that's your new kind of floating topology. And let me just grab this face. So what I mentioned with the sphere earlier is we basically go to Polygon Modeling, create a sphere, scale that sucker up, and then I'll rotate it on its side, 90 degrees. And then you can sort of scale it, warp it to fit. So that's kind of my quick and basic template. So I'll try to select the low res stuff here. I'll hit Control-1 to isolate that. So you basically want the poly count to roughly match up. So I would go into the the subdivision area and then see if I can. The simpler often the better. I think I need to go down a bit more. So try to go in even numbers, which will probably match your. So I think that's kind of close, right, to matching the overall poly count. So I'll take this thing. I'm in symmetry mode, but I realize I need to switch my symmetry probably to, I think, Y or Z. See Y. There we go. So I'm going to basically hold tab and select down and around the areas that I basically know I don't really need at this point. Okay, I'll hit delete. Delete that. So then I can take these two and combine them. Shift right click, combine. And then I just start target welding. Target welding is probably the easiest way to go. I think I have to go back to Object Symmetry X. There. Then we can do, either target welding or you can do merge verts. I like merge verts because it kind of averages the gap sometimes. Usually I want them kind of bridging across here, so I'll go to bridge, give it a couple divisions, and again I'm trying to match divisions across here a bit, so I'm going to probably add a couple, I think, this way. And then if I do another bridge, that's good, clean, rebridge, rebridge, and then this is actually a quad if I look at it closely enough. I'm going to go and just do fill hole. Now, I usually prefer my loops around the eyes to be circular, so sometimes I may need to tweak the mesh. So I want this loop over here to connect. So I'm going to just grab these two verts and do a merge as well. So sometimes I will change the flow depending on, you know, how things are looking for me. So I'm going to see if I can adjust that a bit. So I'll cut across here, and now I should be able to take this edge out. These edges out, and I can always reinsert a loop as well. So, by the way, you can do what's called a selection constraint or transform constraint. So edge slide. So if I want to slide or nudge this edge away from that, I can kind of just pull those apart, and it's going to try to keep the underlying shape there. So that can be very useful. Oops, I want to go to connect. There we go. So yeah, sometimes, you know, I'll decide, you know, I'm going to hack this and sort of change directions a bit, and that's totally fine. Collapse edge there. Okay, so I'm going to just readjust this, and I'll turn off that edge slide. Okay. Turn edge slide back on for a minute and slide this back over. So again, I really like to keep my vertices following the anatomy. If we smooth this out, it's definitely still very undefined yet, but let's turn off edge slide again. Okay, so just turning that object back on. So for the rest of the head, it's generally, for me, pretty straightforward. I would take this bottom edge, and just straighten this out a bit, shift drag, and I'll just combine these two verts. And then it's really just a series of shift drag at this point. Deselect this. So if I get out of here, it's always a good idea too to sort of look at the underlying shape, because chances are this thing will start to kind of scale in, maybe scale a little bit shallower. So I'm just doing a very ballpark shaping of that. And then I'll target weld there. And I'll just do fill on that. So again, projecting later in ZBrush can help me regain that shape. For anatomical purposes, you know, a lot of times I will extend down a here, let me go back to object here for a sec. So you can extend this sort of loop down and have it meet at the clavicle. This is a muscle. I think I remember it. Sternocleidomastoid. This thing that kind of helps anchor the head and keep it from flopping around. So the sternocleidomastoid, right? You know, even in a cartoony character, I would think about having that kind of connection and that sort of edge flow. I wouldn't say it's essential in cartoonier characters, but I will try to keep this thing in mind. All right, so kind of rotate it, get it roughly in a position where you think it should sort of belong. Yeah, pull it back and then pull it a bit wider here, and maybe rotate it a bit more. There. So you can do just a couple really simple big extrusions for that, and then it should sort of turn forward, scale it flat. Then I would figure out that kind of placement a bit later on, you know, once I start filling in the rest from extruding below the jaw. So the rest is really just like extruding down, trying to find the place where it belongs. Let's do a little connect for now, just so I can push this a little bit more against the body there. Okay, so then it's, yeah, this thing here, this edge, probably connect. Then I think I'll target weld, or I think I might even just do a quick bridge here, a quick bridge here, and do a fill. So sometimes I will allow triangles, and those triangles can be an advantage in a way too, because I can put a little crease or indentation in those regions. So I probably will need an edge in between here. So I'll go to connect, and then I can kind of shove that thing back in, maybe rotate it into the right position. Then you got a rotation snap on, and yeah, I'll just turn that off. So, taking that edge, shift drag. All right, so you can kind of just pull the whole loop with it. So yeah, I'll do the same thing, kind of pull it down. And again, I will wind up using something like the sculpting brushes inside of Maya. So get out of that. So I can quickly go in and do some relaxing, some averaging. By the way, I think, again, depending on the scale, this thing might be huge, so you might just be careful of how big that brush is. So we'll want to start to average the distance on some of these things, kind of get out some of the weirdness in the brush. So again, I'll probably need to add more loops, so I'll just add a couple more quickly in here. So the rest is pretty much straightforward. You know, just keep extruding, especially along the neck here. Shift drag it down until you meet your next loop, and then again scale and adjust as you go. You know, even though ZBrush is going to handle a lot of that projection, you still want the surfaces to be close. So they shouldn't be totally out of alignment with each other. And again, watch your edge placement too. I think down here I'm going to need to do some relaxing. There. So that looks also a lot better as well, right? A little more appealing. Doesn't look so strange. Oh, I think I forgot too, the ear. So where is my my ear area is kind of right around here, I think. If I'm looking through wireframe, that's about right. Okay, so I'm going to isolate this again, go back to my face mode. So I'll show you a little trick like you can do for human ears. It can start this way where you basically just extrude this out, again with no divisions. Then I'll have a tendency to kind of rotate. What's going on with my rotate tool now? Reset. It's very strange. There we go. Selection. There we go. Man, Maya today, super weird, super weird. So I'll extend this back a bit and then pull that. It's a very, very simplified shape right now, right? If you need to have more of that kind of thickness in the ear, what I recommend, grabbing these edges here, And depending on whether there's an attached or detached lobe, you can have a connecting edge. Sometimes I'll just select all the way through. I'll show you another little shortcut to this. Do a connection, and then we take this edge, collapse, do the same thing. So I'll hit G to repeat, shift double click through here, G to repeat, take that edge, take it out, take that edge, take it out. So we have quads, and then if you're smoothing, you start to have, right, that thickness that you need for the ear and the back shape. You can further connect it if need be. Yeah, let's take these guys. I'm going to merge these together. For interior ear shapes, then you can do extrusion with an offset. Man, I've got to reset my extrusions. They are crazy high right now. All right, so as you kind of move up in you know, topology terms, you're going to have more of a thickness. I do need to worry about this thing here, so I'm going to just pull this back out. Okay, so this is kind of your low-res control for a starter ear, at least. Cartoonier characters will be much, much simpler shapes. Yeah, again, with the mouth cavity and lips, it's the same thing. We just kind of shift extrude. Whoa. Shift extrude. Yeah, I don't know what's up with my scaling today. It's so weird. It's been completely bizarre. Oh well, I'll just extrude instead. Yeah, it's so odd. I don't get that. Anyways, yeah, I would generally just do a shift scale down for that. So again, this is very, very low res. If you look at the poly count, as I mentioned earlier, I'm getting close to 650. So once I get those first kind of details down, again, same thing with the eye extrusion. I'm going to try to just shift scale this one more time. There, that's actually working now. Pull this back a bit. And then shift, pull back one more time, and scale it up and out. So you have kind of the beginning of your eye cup. Let's try this lip thing again. Shift scale. Okay, so that's starting to kind of work. So I usually have 3 loops. The outer loop defines the lip line. This second loop here is kind of like what I call the plump line. So that's basically the part that's going to define the sort of thickness of the lip. So I'll pull that back and in a bit. And then there's the contact between the two. So you shift scale them. Again, there's a lot of little finessing and moving around, but again, I don't want to bore you guys to death right now. So I'll just close that up. So this is like pass 1 of the topology. I would extend and finish the rest, but so what you can do to move on is go to Mesh Smooth. So now you're actually integrating, right, full topology at this point. You can start to better define the nose, the nostril. Do a little soft select on that. I should probably double check my topology there. All right, so you can start to reshape this a bit better as well. So if your character needs, you know, nostrils, I've already shown you guys how to do that as well. So we can kind of cut those in, do an extrusion as well. But you got nice clean topology, right? Edge flow that goes and flows around the eyes, around the mouth and lips, right? So the ability to shift, double click, and have that line go through, that loop go through the mouth, it's great for UVs. It makes it really fast. For animation, really efficient.